Cola, and I support and move the motion of confidence in the Tanaiste and the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Defence. And I am very conscious that at the centre of all of this is very real human anguish. There is the anguish, the grief of Harvey Morrison Sherritt's parents, Gillian and Stephen, and his wider family circle. And there is the anguish of too many children and young people and their families who are in the process of trying to access services or who have struggled to access services in the past. So I want to begin my contribution by offering my personal condolences again to Harvey's family on their terrible loss, and by acknowledging that as a country we need to do much better when it comes to healthcare services and in particular spinal services for our children. I respect Deputy Tobin's good faith and acknowledge his genuine concern, as I do with all deputies in this House. My only frustration with the course of action that he had indicated he was going to take is that motions of confidence, or indeed of no confidence, do not in and of themselves provide services or address the challenges that we're all concerned about. And I want to assure the House and the families listening to this debate that as a government we are steadfast and determined in our efforts to address these challenges. And these efforts include strengthening governance and oversight, driving down waiting times, ensuring increased engagement and timely communications with families of patients with a view to building a better and more responsive service. This latter point is important because quite apart from the quality of care provided to children, the level and quality of communication between clinicians and parents in many cases has been far short of what should reasonably be expected. We know this through a succession of existing and pending reports about the corporate and clinical governance concerns at CHI. And most recently, in response to this, governance and oversight structures have been strengthened at CHI, with the appointment of Dr. Yvonne Traynor as chairperson of the board and 2 additional board members, Fergus Finlay and Suzanne Garvey. And this builds on 4 previous appointments earlier this year, and I want to thank those involved for their contribution. In addition, the Minister for Health has also recently announced her intention to fully integrate CHI into the HSE, given that the National Children's Hospital Ireland will be the central hub for paediatric care, and I strongly support the Minister in this decision. And indeed, the Minister and the Taoiseach have been engaged with families and advocates in respect of the structure and need for an inquiry into the overall issues pertaining to CHI. This step will bring coherence in terms of bringing CHI under the aegis of the HSE, will bring coherence of governance across paediatric services and support smoother pathways of care for children, delivering lasting benefits for families across the country. And it will be an important step in the continued reform of the provision of health services for children and young people. And the HSE CEO has also established the CHI Improvement Steering Group to coordinate oversight of the range of matters of focus in CHI, including the implementation of recommendations from completed reviews, upcoming reports, spinal services and the commissioning of the new Children's Hospital. We'll continue to strongly invest in services and in tackling waiting lists, particularly for spinal procedures, by increasing capacity and substantial resources. And several initiatives are underway to help to improve access to those services, including a ring-fenced theatre, additional outpatient clinics and national and international outsourcing to maximise capacity. And there are increased procedures, additional procedures every year, but not enough, and we need to do much more. A new orthopaedic spinal surgeon has started with CHI since the 11th of August and is already having a significant impact on waiting lists. And the Paediatric Spinal Services Management Unit is now ensuring that patients are prioritised correctly for surgery and works to reduce waiting times, and has now dedicated pathways for GPs to refer a patient to CHI, which ensures that urgent cases will be prioritised. And spinal services remain a priority under the Waiting List Action Plan in 2025, and every effort has been made to reduce the time children and families are waiting for spinal procedures. And for many children and young people, successful surgery can significantly enhance their lives and can really improve prospects and so forth. But for many, it's the beginning of a long journey, living with disability. And as a government, we're committed to doing more and doing better when it comes to disability. And that does mean a step change in how services are provided and in how disabled people and their families are supported to live their lives to the fullest extent possible. And the primacy of the family and the interaction of services with the family is something that has to be dramatically transformed and enhanced. It's not good enough at the moment. And there are many people working extremely hard and with the best of goodwill in our services. And we will continue to increase funding and resources to meet the challenges ahead. And the new National Human Rights Strategy for Disabled People is a significant step forward. And it represents a commitment that all disabled people should be able to live the lives that they're choosing without barriers. And we're determined to deliver a transformative programme of work across the full range of issues that affect people in their daily lives, from education, employment, income supports, active participation in society through culture, housing and sport. And we're backing those commitments with record levels of investment as part of the updated National Development Plan. And the budget represents a further step in that direction. And in all of this and much more, the Tanaiste has been an active and steadfast partner. He has been a diligent, very dedicated and effective Minister for Foreign Affairs and Defence. In an uncertain and increasingly fraught geopolitical world, he has articulated Ireland's commitment to human rights and the rules-based international order eloquently and without fear or favour. Together we have provided unparalleled leadership in Europe in response to the war in Gaza. We've been strong in our support to the people of Ukraine following Russia's invasion, and we are steering our country through the perils of ever-changing US trade policy. We're improving our health service for the better. We're making the investment necessary to build the houses the country needs and to deliver the core energy, water and transport infrastructure that will be the bedrock of our country's success for generations to come. We are investing in our Gardaí and our defence forces to keep our people safe. We're tackling inequality and ensuring that our young people are among the best educated in the world. We understand the fundamentals that underpin our economic success, and we are committed to protecting and promoting them. We are committed to eradicating child poverty. We're building the country's financial strength to withstand further economic headwinds. We're doing all these things and more based on a strong mandate, a relationship of trust and respect, and an ambitious programme for government. It's worth pointing out that we went to the country less than a year ago. This government is about 9 months old. The Irish people made their judgment in that election on the performance of the last government. And I would respectfully suggest that they didn't take on board, it was at variance with Deputy Tobin's approach. This led to the re-election of the Fianna Fáil party, the Fine Gael party and the independents into this government to deal with very unsettled times. So we have a very clear mandate from the people, only less than a year ago. That's an important point when emotions of no confidence are indicated, and my government is responding with a vote of confidence. I think fundamentally we do have to focus on the provision of services. I get that fully. But the tabling of motions of no confidence in themselves, I respectfully suggest, is not going to do that. We need very clear focus, both in terms of resources, but also in terms of how we structurally change the delivery of health services, particularly for children and particularly for those who need spinal services at the right time in terms of their optimal journey, in terms of their recovery and in terms of what is clinically indicated as being the right time. And I know the Tanaiste and I and the entire government, the Minister for Health, are very, very committed to doing that. And I commend this motion of confidence to the House.
Tanaiste.
This House gathers today less than a year since the last general election, as the Taoiseach reminds us, and indeed just over 250 days since the government was formed. The 34th Dáil sits at a time of global uncertainty, a time of geopolitical turbulence. It was in this context that the people made their choice at the last election, and the resultant Dáil has very serious business to do on their behalf. We have just seen the first of 5 budgets, which will seek to create the conditions for our country to maintain a strong economy, protect jobs, improve public services, and build for our future. We're making a record investment in housing and infrastructure, and we're pulling every policy lever at our disposal to dramatically address this major challenge. The Department of Health now has a budget of over €27 billion, and this record allocation has been accompanied by a significant programme of reform to enable faster and fairer care. The level of investment in disability services this year is truly a step change compared to all previous years, and it needs to be. And the Government is deeply committed to overseeing delivery now and making sure that that huge financial investment actually makes a difference in the lives of people who so desperately need that. These are some of the major issues of concern to the Irish public, and their expectation is that we're relentless in making progress and indeed in working together on these matters. In my experience, most members of this House seek to work constructively to do just that. I've always endeavoured to work on many issues on a cross-party basis. It's often when we do our best work. I can think of examples like Sláinte Care or referenda campaigns, but also more recently I was glad to work with members across this House to support Irish citizens on the global Samud flotilla. In every capacity that I've served, I've always taken responsibility and accounted for my actions before this House, before the Seanad, in committees, in public, and crucially at the ballot box. I've acknowledged time and again that we're not where we need to be in addressing ongoing deficits in the care of children in spinal services, despite the sincere efforts of successive ministers, governments and Taoiseach. I'm very conscious of the tragic loss of Harvey Morrison Sherish, and I've expressed directly my deep sorrow to his parents, Gillian and Stephen. In recent times, further significant concerns have been raised in relation to spinal services, and I, the Minister for Health, Taoiseach, the Government, have responded by saying we must listen to and work with parents and advocacy groups who are highlighting hugely worrying and important issues. We must humbly listen and act. That has been the purpose of my engagement with Harvey's family and with other parent advocates. That's been what the Taoiseach, the Minister and I have been working on over the last number of weeks. Like members across this House, I've been overwhelmed by the passion and determination of these families who have already been through so much, but are acting out of a deep commitment to getting better care for others. I know that members of all political parties and independent colleagues attended a briefing in the AV room yesterday, as did the Minister for Health, and heard the most distressing and convincing testimony supporting the need for an inquiry. All members who attended and spoke at the briefing were united and constructive in their response. We have agreed to work in partnership on the structure of an inquiry into spina bifida and scoliosis services, with a further meeting to take place shortly with Gillian and Stephen and representative groups. And in this House, this Government will work with anyone who wants to work constructively to make progress on this matter. That's Corda, that is my priority in responding to these important matters, and I know it's the priority of the entire Government. When the Government came to office in January of this year, we promised to put people before politics. It was and remains our commitment to service, to responsibility, and to the belief that public office carries with it a duty to enter government and use our time as elected representatives to deliver progress. On the day the government was formed, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and our independent colleagues made a conscious choice. We set aside differences, not because it was easy, but because it was the right thing to do for our country. And over the course of the last 9 months, we've set about honouring this democratic mandate given to us by the Irish people. Acting on that mandate, we've launched the largest capital plan in the history of the state, investing €102.4 billion over the next 5 years. It's a plan not built on headlines, but on homes, on hospitals, on schools, on transport, on the foundations of a fair economy. 1 in every €3 in that plan will be dedicated to housing, because we know that without a secure home, no other part of a person's life can truly take root. To make that funding deliver requires reform of planning, land use, construction, finance and local delivery, the key enablers. We've introduced rent pressure zones nationwide, providing certainty and stability. We've changed apartment standards. We've introduced a series of measures in last week's budget to stimulate supply and tackle vacancy and dereliction. And shortly we'll publish a new housing plan which will reaffirm this government's commitment to deliver the homes our country needs. I know that a republic is judged not just by what it builds, but by how it cares. And in the area of disability, we have so much work to do. We've sought to and we must move beyond aspiration to action. I'm pleased that Ministers Foley and Naughton have overseen a record level of investment in disability services, an increase of over €618 million in extra funding in last week's budget. What matters now is how we use it. And we've been engaging directly with parents, with carers, with advocates, with people like Cara Darmody, listening to their voices and trying to act on what they tell us. doubling the fund dedicated to assisting parents accessing assessments of needs. We're trying to listen and respond. Minister McEntee has established a national therapy service, putting therapists in special schools, with the rollout in 45 schools this year and more to follow. It's a start, not a finish, and we will and we must go further. I've long believed, and I know the Taoiseach has long believed, that children with additional needs should not have to fight the system for the services they need. The system must be changed to support them, and we're working every day to make this a reality. Lescan Corla, in my own direct areas of responsibility, foreign affairs and defence, we've continued to stand shoulder to shoulder with those in crisis, with the people of Ukraine defending their sovereignty, with civilians in Gaza facing intolerable suffering. Ireland's voice on the world stage has remained rooted in human rights, peace and humanitarian law. We've provided record levels of assistance because neutrality can never mean indifference. Compassion must be matched by action. In defence, we've delivered record funding to our defence forces. We're on the trajectory of reaching level of ambition too. And this is not simply about equipment, it's about respect. Respect for the men and women of Óglaigh na hÉireann who serve, who respond in storms on seas, in search and rescue, in peacekeeping missions, often unseen, but never unnoticed. Lescan Corla, throughout my time in public life, as a Minister of State in the Department of Finance, as Minister for Health or Further and Higher Education, Minister for Justice, Taoiseach, Tanaiste, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Trade and Defence, I've always tried to do one thing, to work hard in service of the people. I've never claimed to be infallible, but I do act in good faith. And when I make mistakes and when I err, I acknowledge them. I don't always get everything right, but let us distinguish scrutiny from cynicism and accountability from opportunism. Let's reduce the toxicity in political debate. I respect every member of this House because each one carries a mandate directly from the Irish people. We must not permit the framing of debate to be decided by those who view politics as a zero-sum game composed of confrontation rather than conviction. Political leadership matters, and it matters whether we lean towards polarisation or towards solidarity. It matters whether we cultivate division or whether we seek to build on what unites us. Our priority, my priority, remains the same: to work to build a country in which every person, regardless of their starting point, has the support and opportunity to live with dignity. That must be our North Star. We're not satisfied that there are still many areas where we have sufficient and significant deficiencies and major improvements to make. We must be restless to do more. We are committed to delivering. We're committed to working in partnership. We're committed to working in good faith. That is the duty of government. That is the duty which guides me each day and every day, and it will continue to do so as this government fulfils the mandate given to us by the Irish people, and as I continue to fulfil mine.
Sure. This is a request that the speeches be circulated. Minister Canny.
Thank you, Lescan Corla. Back in January, I made a decision as an independent TD to engage constructively in the formation of a new government. My focus was simple: to ensure that the ambitions we have for Ireland could be realised in a practical, balanced and fair way. Throughout that process, I found the Tanaiste, Simon Harris, to be honest and open, willing to share ideas and genuinely committed to reaching consensus. Those early discussions were not about power or position, but about policy, priorities and people. The Tanaiste showed integrity, determination and the ability to listen. That is what real leadership looks like. Since entering government, I and the independent group of ministers have worked closely with our partners to deliver on the programme for government. It is built on respect, dialogue and a shared focus on outcomes. From the outset, the government set out a vision to deliver a fairer, more sustainable and more resilient Ireland. We're now beginning to see that vision take shape. The revised National Development Plan is a cornerstone of that progress, a plan with transformational intent and tangible impact. It will see €275.4 billion in public capital investment to 2035. This is not investment for headlines. It is investment that will secure Ireland's future, unlocking new housing supply, modernising our water and energy systems, upgrading our roads and regional connectivity, improving our health infrastructure, expanding renewable regeneration, and ensuring public transport becomes the first choice of more people in every county. We are building capacity for a growing population, a more innovative economy and a greener way of living. This is the true measure of progress. Just last week, the government delivered on the largest budget in the history of the state. This is not a one-off gesture. It is the first step in a multi-year plan to address real issues for those who need support. It delivers on our programme for government commitments, tackling the cost of living pressures, supporting families, investing in public services and building a fairer society. Now more than ever, Ireland needs stability. We are operating in a time of global uncertainty, and that demands consistent leadership. What we need is a stable government that can take the long view, not one distracted by political noise or short-term thinking. There is still much to do over the remaining years of this government, but the ambition is clear, the pathway is set, and the partnership is working. The goals laid out in the programme for government, from housing and healthcare to rural development, environmental action and economic resilience, cannot be achieved overnight. They require steady hands and a shared commitment. The Tanaiste's role, both as a national leader and as Minister for Foreign Affairs, have been vital in ensuring that Ireland's voice remains calm, principled and consistent on the world stage. In a time of extraordinary turbulence, from the ongoing conflict in Ukraine to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, he has led with compassion and conviction. Ireland's reputation abroad is built on the principle and humanity, and the Taoiseach has embodied both. He has represented Ireland in a way that commands respect. Within the European Union and indeed globally, the Taoiseach has been a force for stability, reason and leadership. He has not shied away from difficult positions or challenging conversations. He has stood up and spoken out when it was not easy or popular to do so, but when it was necessary. This is what true leadership looks like. Leadership is not about chasing headlines or popularity polls. It is about standing firm in your convictions, being honest with the people and doing what is right, even when it is difficult. The Taoiseach has shown those qualities time and again, both at home and abroad. For that reason, and for his steadfast commitment to the responsibilities of high office, I have no hesitation in supporting the motion of confidence in the Taoiseach. He has gone above and beyond the call of duty for the people of Ireland and our standing in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald.
Good morning, good to Count Corla. The motion tabled today by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil is a move cynically designed to intercept and shut down a prospective motion of no confidence in Taoiseach Simon Harris, to shield him from being held to account for his litany of failures, but primarily his profound failure of children with scoliosis and spina bifida. And the pace with which government moved to protect Simon Harris today stands in very marked contrast to the constant delay that is the hallmark of his failure of some of the most vulnerable in our society. The making and breaking of promises has come to define his time in office as Minister for Health, as Taoiseach and now as Taoiseach. Broken promises that have caused deep hurt, pain and anger for so many people. Broken promises that have damaged lives in the most serious way. It's also important to say, Count Corlett, that the call for a no-confidence motion in Simon Harris, or indeed the call for Simon Harris to resign, didn't originate here in the Dáil. Those calls came directly from a groundswell of public anger, an anger that grew throughout the weeks of late summer, conveyed in protest and marches, following the harrowing death of 9-year-old Harvey Morrison Sherratt, who suffered from scoliosis and spina bifida. Calls for justice that were supported by Harvey's heartbroken parents, Gillian and Stephen. And I want to record that there is nothing toxic nor cynical in their calls for accountability and justice. Quite the opposite, in fact. Their heartache, hurt and anger is traced back and connected to the promise made by Tanaiste in 2017, when as Minister for Health he promised that no child would wait more than 4 months for spinal surgery. What that promise meant to those children and their families should never ever be underestimated. You see, they took Simon Harris at his word. They believed that they were finally being listened to, that finally government would provide the resources needed to end the suffering of their children and to give their children the chance at life to which they were entitled. Sadly, over the last 8 years, that promise has been broken over and over again. Children have been left to wait in agony, their conditions deteriorating by the day as they are denied the operations that could change their lives, indeed, that might save their lives. Year by year, Chocta Harris's promise came to be seen for what it was, something that sounded good on radio, good for the moment. And the anger surrounding the Tanaiste's broken promise has only been aggravated by his attempt to pass the buck to HSE officials. So for your words, for your empty promise, for giving these children and their families false hope, you, Tanaiste, are the only person responsible. You weren't a commentator, you weren't even a backbench TD. You were the Minister for Health, making a serious commitment. So the buck stops with you, and only with you. Harvey Morrison Sherratt was born the year Simon Harris was appointed Minister for Health. And then in 2017, when Harvey was just 1 year old, his parents were told that his ribs were crushing his lungs. That was the same year that Tanaiste made his infamous promise. While waiting years for the operation he desperately needed, the curve in Harvey's spine deteriorated from 75 degrees to 130 degrees. Harvey's dad, Stephen, said, "We watched him deteriorate, cry in pain, struggle to breathe, and lose the sparkle in his eye." Speaking on the Late Late Show last month, his mum Gillian said, "Knowing that he was only going to live to be 9, knowing that he spent the guts of 3 years in pain on a wait list feels incredibly unjust. If Harvey had access to timely health care, he wouldn't have missed so much of his childhood. We would have more memories as a family, more happy memories, and not so many negative memories. It robbed him of a large portion of his childhood, and that is incredibly unfair." These are the words of parents who have lost about as much as you can lose in life. In September of last year, in the Dáil, I raised with Simon Harris Harvey's worsening condition, the need for urgent surgery, and the fact that he had been silently removed from the waiting list without his parents' knowledge. Deputy Harris promised to urgently meet with the parents. And yet it took more than a year to fulfil that promise, and by that time, Harvey had died. He had sadly passed away. Harvey's parents will be the first to tell you that he is not the only child who has suffered and who suffers as a result of government's failure of children. Over the last number of years, I have had the privilege of getting to know a lad from Tullamore by the name of TJ Coughlin quite well. Some of you might know TJ. He's an amazing young man. He's smart, he's positive, he's full of optimism, he's great crack. He's just a real lover of life. Having been born with spina bifida, TJ was diagnosed with scoliosis at the age of 9. He was told he needed an operation to correct the curve in his spine. He was left to wait years without surgery, and TJ waited so long that he became inoperable at the age of 13 years, and he's now confined to a wheelchair. The curve in his back remains, causing him pain and difficulty breathing. This courageous young man has been robbed of the life that he deserved, and his big appeal is that this should never, ever happen to one other child. Yesterday, as was noted, the Oireachtas AV room was packed to capacity with TDs, Shanadors, with the Minister herself. And we all heard parents speak of the pain, the trauma, the suffering of their children with scoliosis and spina bifida, children waiting in agony for their operations, children who waited so long they became inoperable, parents racked with worry that their child might die waiting for the care and surgery they need. It's stolen childhoods, it's broken lives, it's damaged futures, a catalogue of human hurt and anger that stems from a most profound betrayal, a promise broken by you, Tanaiste. Today, there are 225 children waiting for their operations. The promise is being broken again in real time today as we speak. The lifeline of children being able to access surgery abroad has proven a dead end for most. The promise of a public inquiry into the care of spina bifida and scoliosis patients at Children's Health Ireland must be fulfilled, and it is essential now that government move heaven and earth to get every child the surgery they need. Because Simon Harris's broken promise can't steal from those children what it has already stolen from so many others. Of course, the backdrop to this catastrophic failure of children is the ongoing fiasco surrounding the National Children's Hospital. As Minister for Health, Simon Harris signed the contract for this project, something he very bizarrely denied during general election debates last year. A brazen attempt to distance himself from responsibility. The opening of this hospital has been delayed again and again. Billions of public money have been spent, and yet to this day, not one child treated. Broken promises cut more deeply when they're broken by someone with the power to make a difference. And if the Taoiseach can break such a profound promise to children in such desperate need of surgery, then it should come as no surprise that he can so readily break his promises on issues like the cost of living, giving ordinary workers a break in their income tax, abolishing student fees, or delivering affordable childcare. Those big election promises were all broken in last week's budget. A budget in which government brags, as they have done again today, about their billions and still manages to leave working people worse off. Yeah. You see, arrogance and a sense of entitlement is the bedrock upon which your government was formed. The foundation stone of a grubby deal struck by Simon Harris, Micheál Martin and Michael Lowry. A deal all about holding on to power at all costs, about protecting the positions of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, about feathering the nests of those at the top. Delivering for children with scoliosis and spina bifida wasn't even on the radar when you were brokering that deal. You tabled this motion today simply because you didn't want a vote of no confidence in the Fine Gael leader landing in the same week as the presidential election. That's actually your priority, and we all know it. Let it be said, in that election, people will have the opportunity to vote for values that stand in marked contrast to broken promises and grubby deals, the proven currency of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil in government. It's a currency, of course, with which Fine Gael's presidential candidate, Heather Humphreys, is fully comfortable. She was fully aware of the promise that Simon Harris made to children with scoliosis and spina bifida, fully aware of the devastation caused to families when that promise was repeatedly broken, and yet she backed him to the hilt. And I have no doubt if she were in the chamber today, she would back him again. Nominating him for Taoiseach, she had this to say:
outside of the House.
It is simply this sense of wanting to help, of breaking down barriers and making life better for people that drives Simon Harris. I know under his leadership we'll see a major focus on improving supports for people with disabilities. So she said. Now, I'd imagine at that time the parents of children waiting in agony for spinal surgery listened in disbelief to that. I'd imagine the parents of children left waiting and waiting for their assessment of needs were also left shaking their heads in disbelief, because remember, it's taken 15-year-old Cara Darmody to force any movement from government on this issue. And may I remind you, as she consistently does, that you are still breaking the law, leaving children on waiting lists and not abiding by your 6-month statutory duty. The vast majority of people are decent and trusting, and they believe that if you say something, that you'll follow it through. If you promise something, you'll keep your word and come through for them, especially on an issue profoundly affecting their lives. Making promises is easy. Doing the work to keep those promises is hard, and Simon Harris doesn't want to do the hard work. So the shattering of public trust in Simon Harris, which has mounted in recent months, is a result of the Tanaiste revealing himself to be a man who will say what needs to be said to get a positive reaction in any particular moment, but does not follow through on commitments made. The collapse in trust has been fostered by the Tanaiste's own actions, his own words, and a litany of broken promises. That is the record that he is confronted with today. Níl muín ar bith agam as Simon Harris. Bhain sé bheatha amach as gealtanas mhór thuairt agus iad a bhrisise. Tá dochar ulmhór déanta do bhór na gealtanas bhrisise seo agus tá daoine a bhfuil cráite. Ní féidir leis freagrat a cheacant a heile. People aren't fools. And they have long memories, and they're good at remembering when those in power walk away from their promises. And I just wonder, away from the cameras and the mics, away from the din and indeed the cut and thrust of here, is there regret at breaking so many commitments? I remember, Tanaiste, that you once said that you remembered the names and faces of children with scoliosis and spina bifida that you had met. Well, they're looking on today, and they feel so badly let down, so badly failed. I have no confidence in you. The families you have let down have no confidence in you. Increasingly, the wide public, seeing more and more, have no confidence in you either. And God hurry the day when they get to remove you from power.
Hear, hear.
Well, just for the information of members, Deputy, you should not make reference to the President or draw that office into any controversy in this House. That is a ruling. You also cannot and should not make reference to people outside of the House. They're not here to defend themselves or to support what you might be claiming. And you did mention that the Minister had lied, and that too is something that should not be said. And I need to say that as Ceann Comhairle, as a last Ceann Comhairle, to remind you all of the rules and to remind you all that we want to conduct this debate properly, giving everyone the opportunity to speak, but observing the rules of the House. Deputy Ivana Bacci.
Last Ceann Comhairle, on behalf of the Labour Party, I want to begin by offering our deepest condolences again to Gillian Sherratt and Stephen Morrison, the parents of young Harvey Morrison Sherratt. I've spoken, as have my colleagues previously, with Gillian, and we're thinking of them today, as indeed we're thinking of all the parents of children with scoliosis, children with spina bifida, who have faced unconscionable delays, unconscionable obstacles in accessing necessary treatments and necessary surgery for their children. I think all of us are thinking of the experiences we've heard about from those parents. One story that stays with me, Tanaiste, is the story told by parents who described lying awake at night, listening to their children crying in pain while awaiting surgery. And those are appalling, appalling experiences for any children, or any parents or any children to have to endure. And it's in that context that you're asking this House to vote confidence in government and in the Minister in the Tanaiste today. And we patently cannot do so. For us in the Labour Party, this motion is not a motion that we can support. And of course, we must oppose this motion. And indeed, it derives from a broken promise. And again, to reiterate, it was a promise made by Minister Harris in 2017 that no child should wait longer than 4 months for spinal surgery. A broken promise when we still see children waiting. But this is just one in a litany of broken promises. And we could put it another way. We could say never before have the actions of a government in Ireland been so divorced from the manifestos on which the governing parties ran. To put it bluntly, these are broken promises. We're seeing just today a 16th deadline passed. More delays on the opening of the new National Children's Hospital. We've seen enormous issues with the governance of children's health in Ireland. And all of these issues, of course, uppermost in the minds of those parents whose children are awaiting surgery. But it's not just children. It's not just children who've been appallingly treated by the state. It's also people who are awaiting a home of their own, who have given up hope, indeed, that they may ever access a home of their own. Because let's not forget, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael canvassed voters for their support less than a year ago now on the basis of a fictional house building projection, grossly overstated figures about house building last year. On childcare, promises were made that childcare fees would be capped at €200 per month within 100 days. That's disappeared, that promise. Cuts to student fees disappeared, and we see instead a €500 increase. Promises around classrooms and numbers of teachers simply done away with. Abolition of means test for carers allowance, again a promise made and not fulfilled. Justice for thalidomide survivors, something I've been pushing teachership with you for many years now. Still nothing there. And so many households still bearing the real burden of the cost of living crisis, of soaring energy costs, 300,000 households in electricity arrears. Indeed, it could be said the only election promise on which you've made good immediately was the wrong-headed VAT cut for hospitality and hairdressing, a narrowing of our tax base with no evidence that this would have any positive impact on businesses or on workers or indeed on consumer prices. And uniquely, we in the Labour Party opposed that cut in last year's budget, in our manifesto last year and in our budget this year. Last week's budget by your government has offered no respite, no sense that promises would be kept or that you would remedy the defects. Ireland has a wealthy economy, for sure, but the society feels poor and people feel let down by government. And you're hearing it as we are. And 2 hours of self-flattery and backslapping, which is what you're promising us with this motion, without having had the actual tabling of any motion of no confidence in government, this really is not what people are looking for. When I travel the country, meeting people, what I'm hearing is insecurity, a sense of insecurity about the future, a sense that children are being most impacted by the failure to act by this government. Children who have additional needs, children with autism, autistic children who are on long waiting lists, who are awaiting services and places, 5,000 children without a home, many more children in poverty, an uncertain future and an insecure present with children paying the highest cost of all. It's at these times that people look to the government for improved public services, for a minimum essential standard of living and for supports and security. And since the election and before, we in Labour have been articulating a vision for an active state that will take responsibility for ensuring the welfare of children and of people, for providing the supports and the security that people need. That's our vision. We continue to offer that alternative vision for Ireland's future, but without a commitment to that vision, without a commitment to delivering on the promises you made in your government, in your manifestos last year, children are going to continue to bear the brunt.
And firstly, I want to just express my concern and my thoughts with the individuals and staff in the care home in Donamead, as obviously a very serious incident happened earlier this afternoon there. Tanaiste, it's a dangerous business in politics when you get people's hopes up, when you overpromise and underdeliver. And the reason we're here today is because of those commitments that you made as Minister for Health back in 2017. I don't doubt the sincerity of your intentions then, but the clear reasons for the failure with regards to your commitment is because of government and how they have failed, how you have failed, Fine Gael and government, supported by Fianna Fáil, to ensure a functioning Children's Hospital Ireland, to ensure a functioning series of paediatric hospitals that then went on to become CHI, that we have an inappropriate system of care for the most vulnerable children in our state. And that arises because there's a failure of corporate governance, a failure of clinical governance, and a failure of management. And the buck stops with government, previous government and this government, in terms of how children have been repeatedly failed. A failure by your government to grasp the issues within the hospital, to ensure that the board of CHI, as it then was, and the board of the individual hospitals actually lived up to their responsibilities and ensured the proper care for those children. But I want to stand up today and look forward and ensure that the legacy of Harvey, Morrison, Sharrett and all those other children who've been failed is that those children who are currently waiting for care get the service and therapy that they so badly deserve and need. And Harvey is only one of a large number of children. I think of Dulciana Carter and all the other children whose names we don't want to bring into the chamber today, because those families have suffered in silence and they want to retain the privacy of their grief and suffering. But those children have been failed because those children have been left inoperable. Those families have been put through the agony far longer than they ever should have, and they've failed in terms of the anxiety that has been imposed upon them because of the promise after promise that has not been lived up to. And those failures continue in terms of the 129 children that are waiting for surgery and have yet to get their scheduled operations. In terms of the children who were told that there would be treatment abroad, in New York, in London, we see so few, if any, being offered that. And there are very serious questions now for this government in terms of the initiatives that we've been told are taken to try and reduce the waiting lists and the failure to take them up, particularly with regards to treatment abroad.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Conor Sheehan.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. Ceann Comhairle, it's amazing what the government can find time for when it wants to, because the fact of the matter is the government couldn't set aside time for the Tanaiste to come in and take questions and answers in relation to children who are on waiting lists for spina bifida, yet it can find time for this motion, complete waste of time, designed to shield a clapped out government from political accountability in the lead up to a presidential election. I spoke to Gillian Sharratt in August of this year, and I was struck first of all by her strength and her determination to get the answers she needs in order so her and her poor husband can have closure. And we need accountability, and the public inquiry into this must be wide enough. It must be statutory, and it must get the parents the answers, and it must get the children the treatment they need. Accountability starts with political accountability, and it starts here. And I regret to say I have no confidence in this government, a hollow husk of a government that offers the people of Ireland little hope. I got to know Orla Maher-Lawler and her daughter Caoimhe, who is spina bifida in my constituency, very, very well in recent months. And I was shocked and horrified by the way Caoimhe was dumped by CHI when she turned 18 in the middle of a healthcare crisis with no proper transition to adult care, because CHI waited for her to age out because her case was too complicated. She is a wheelchair user and she has multiple complex health programmes, and this government has little to offer people. Nothing, in fact, unless you're a property developer or you happen to own a big American fast food chain. Instead, all this government offers young people, people my age in particular, is a rent hike, a hike in the college fees, a chance to emigrate, or maybe a tiny, expensive, dark build-to-rent apartment.
Deputy Minister Peter.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. First of all, Ceann Comhairle, I want to offer my sympathies to Gillian and Stephen, parents of the late Harvey, for their inconsolable loss. Ceann Comhairle, this debate is brought to us here by Aontú, by a party who is absolutely bankrupt of ideas. We've heard their leader, Peadar Tóibín, on Morning Ireland this morning bemoan the fact that he has only 2 or 3 opportunities for private members' business in this House. Yet at the very first opportunity that Aontú has, does it bring forward an alternative plan? Does it bring forward alternative ideas? Does it bring forward a new vision? Absolutely not. The first thing that you have done is brought the nuclear option and tried to pull down the government that is providing solutions together for these families. When I was appointed as Minister for Enterprise, Tourism and Employment, the then Taoiseach, firstly at that time, Simon Harris, immediately said we need to reset and focus on family businesses. And since then, the first 8 weeks, we delivered an SME package, we brought forward an action plan on market diversification, we brought forward an action plan on competitiveness and productivity, enhancing the productive capacity of our economy and ensuring our SMEs get the support that they need. That's a government of delivery. But finally, Count Corley, the moment I was most proud of our Taoiseach, Simon Harris, was back in this chamber on the 23rd of April last year, just 14 days after he was elected Taoiseach, when he came in and delivered a state apology to the victims of the Stardust. At that time, we saw 48 young faces who their lives were taken short. We saw a Taoiseach bring forward an apology full of empathy and compassion that transcended politics. His words were recognised by those who had carried the pain for decades. That's the Simon Harris I know, a man of compassion, a family man. That's the Simon Harris I am proud of, I admire, and I am absolutely privileged that he leads our party.
Deputy Minister of State Thomas Byrne, excuse me.
Guramagat, Walumsa Mohakiak the Hort, Don Tanaiste, Don Ara Ganohi Octraca, because Ara Cousins Simon Harris in Yov, as Walum Fotal, as Takiak, Rune Unrealtish. And there's a bit of a misnomer going around that the government has manufactured this debate today, but in fact this has been standard practice for quite some time that the government would put motions of confidence in itself, and there are at least 5 examples when Labour was in government where motions such as this were put forward and the Labour Party supported, including by Minister Brendan Howlin and others in the party. So this is standard practice when a motion of no confidence is put forward in a minister or a government, and it should be the practice because you
Please, Deputy, one voice. Continue, Minister. Stop interrupting, Deputy Toby.
Any motion of confidence, for any government to continue in office, any motion of confidence, in my opinion, must be dealt with very, very quickly. Ireland and Europe stand at a very critical juncture. War is taking place on our continent. As Minister of State in the Department of Defence and the Department of Foreign Affairs, I'm proud to work with the Tanaiste in making Ireland more secure and in securing our European future, in delivering record budgets for defence and security and preparing for our presidency of the Council of the European Union. We're working to address really important issues, our capability gaps, and to make us more resilient as a country. I work with the Tanaiste to shape EU policies and ambitions in Ireland's interests. In July next year, Ireland takes the lead as we assume the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Monumental work is already underway to ensure that our EU Council presidency delivers for the EU and all Irish and EU citizens, and we cannot be distracted from that work. And let's not forget that when we talk of the European Union, we're talking about ourselves, because we are the European Union, no matter how much some members of the opposition would prefer otherwise. So at this critical juncture, let's deal with the issues, and that includes issues in health, and rise above the politics of confidence motions.
Like others, I want to acknowledge first the parents of Harvey Morrison Sherratt and indeed all of the other parents who were in the AV room yesterday, and I want to thank them for working with me and for engaging with me, and indeed all of the advocates who are bringing to me the issues of today and the issues of yesterday, and we will work together to devise the correct structure to enable a proper inquiry into the work that has happened and not happened in the CHI orthopaedic section. One of the most important comments I heard yesterday is that parents are nearly never wrong, and I know that experience and I know that expression to be correct. Parents know what their children need, and while I have so much respect for so many different areas of specialisms in CHI, oncology, cardiology, there has been and continues to be difficulties in the orthopaedic section in CHI where we have got to change not just the practices, improve the processes, but also real cultural change in relation to listening to parents, respecting parents, responding to parents, and I can assure every person in this House and anybody watching that I'm putting every element of my energy and good faith into trying to improve that. I have Simon Harris as Tanaiste and is working with me to help to do that. He and I met parents and advocates very recently. We have responded to them by private correspondence, and he and I will meet them again at their convenience in the next number of weeks. I want to say that Simon Harris is, like everybody else here, Simon Harris is a committed public representative. He is here to serve his constituents, he is here to serve his community, he is here to serve the Irish state. He entered politics at a young age for good reasons, and he has devoted his adult professional life to serving his community. We are all here because we too are committed to the people whom we represent. We all act in good faith, and we have a substantial body of work that Tanaiste and I, the government, to improve spinal services and orthopaedic services more broadly in CHI. And while steps have been made that have been noted here, I certainly commit, as everybody else should, to improving the services.
Now we move to Minister of State, Jerry Buttenberg.
Gurmaga Ceann Comhairle Éireann Céadúil Síos tá gach muín ag mise agus an rialtas hon an Tanaiste fear úsal ceanra láidir agus cothram agus go mómhar fear agus duine lán le trua. In every role that Simon Harris has played, Ceann Comhairle, he has demonstrated a number of attributes. He's personal, he's committed to people, committed to working with people collectively, and everything he does is about making our society and our world and our communities a better place. Leadership is about responsibility. It's about facing up to mistakes, it's about making those mistakes and making the policy into real life, impacting on people. Simon Harris does that every single day in his job. He's demonstrated responsibility. We saw it in COVID, and in every one of his portfolios we've seen what he's done and what he does. He's a man of fairness, of huge compassion, of empathy. He stands up for people every single day. And I would challenge members across the chamber, Simon Harris stands up and represents people. He's not hollow, he's not empty. He's a man of empathy, a man of action, a man I'm proud to support today. I'm confident in this man. And Deputy O'Flynn may well smirk at me. But when you come into government, it's about taking responsibility and making decisions that require leadership. And in Simon Harris, we had that leader. Gurmagat.
Thank you. Minister of State, John Cummins.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. I've known Simon Harris since we were both about 19 years of age. Even then, before he entered politics, you could tell that he was someone different, someone with a genuine desire to make a difference. It has always been obvious that Simon got involved in public life because he cared and was committed to helping others. As Minister for Health, Simon Harris took on one of the toughest jobs in politics, progressing the likes of free GP care, expanding the HPV vaccination programme and securing access to life-changing cystic fibrosis drugs. His decision to approve a second cardiac cath lab at UHW will have a profound and lasting impact on patients across the southeast of this country. When the system said no, Simon Harris said yes, because he knew it was the right thing to do, and he had the courage to do it. This has enabled cardiac services to expand at UHW, with the final steps to 24/7 cardiac care underway. As Minister for Further and Higher Education, Simon again brought that same determination and focus to inclusion. He prioritised advancing opportunities for people with additional needs, ensuring they could continue their educational development in the same way as their peers. He also placed relentless focus on apprenticeships, ensuring students who wished to pursue that pathway were not made to feel inferior to those who wished to pursue a third-level education. Simon was also the minister that delivered a university to Waterford in the southeast after many, many years of campaigning. The follow-on awarding of veterinary medicine and pharmacy degree programmes show his commitment to develop education across our regions. As Taoiseach, Simon continued to show empathy, sensitivity and humanity, and Minister Burke has referenced his decision to issue a formal state apology to the victims of the Stardust tragedy on behalf of the Irish people. As Tanaiste, he has acted with distinction on the world stage at some of the most critical points in time for Europe and the world. Ceann Comhairle, Simon Harris has shown time and again that his leadership is about service to the people of Ireland, and I have full confidence in his ability as Tanaiste. Thank you.
David Cullinane.
Ceann Comhairle, the people that I give credit for delivering enhanced cardiac services for Waterford are the people of Waterford who took to the streets in their thousands several times and had to force this government kicking and screaming to deliver those very services. Ceann Comhairle, Simon Harris's record as a minister and as a leader is not one of competence, vision or progress. When I think of Simon Harris, I think of broken promises to children with scoliosis and spina bifida, compounded by false hope and children left in pain. Under Simon Harris's watch, children with chronic conditions and children with disabilities have been failed and let down time and again. And under Simon Harris's leadership, in what should have been a solution for these children, instead it was a long, long road of delayed care and poor health outcomes. In 2017, when he was Minister for Health, Simon Harris made that infamous solemn promise that no child would be left waiting longer than 4 months for scoliosis surgery by the end of that year. It was a clear commitment that offered hope to worried families. But 8 years later, that promise, Tanaiste, is a bitter memory. Today, there are 41 children who are still waiting longer than 6 months, never mind 4 months, for their life-changing surgery. Countless more children have been removed from waiting lists entirely because they have been left for so long that their condition has become inoperable. Precious children have lost not only their mobility, but tragically their lives. And of course, my heart today and my thoughts are with Harvey Morrison, Sherrett, and of course his parents as well, Gillian and Stephen. Tanaiste, in 2018, you also established Children's Health Ireland in law. That body is now set to be wound down in crisis because of devastating failures under your watch and the government's watch. CHI has been the subject of several serious reviews and scandals, much of which it tried to hide from families and from the Oireachtas. Families came to you, they came to us. We raised this time and again in the Dáil. Over 6 or 7 years, all of those scandals, all of the failures, the lack of governance in Children's Health Ireland, we raised with you time and again, as did those families. And they were stonewalled and they were left ignored. And that's why they are now calling for a full public, statutory, independent inquiry. Despite the fact that you refused to accept this, you did sign off on the contract for the Children's Hospital. And we learned today that the 16th completion date will come and go. Construction started 10 years ago on that hospital that you signed off on, and yet not one single child has been treated. So how could anybody with a straight face come into this Dáil and say they have a confidence in a person who was the Minister for Health, who gave a solemn commitment to children with scoliosis and spina bifida that was broken, who set up Children's Health Ireland only for that same entity to now be wound down in disgrace in relation to many of those failures, and to sign a contract in a hospital that is in controversy and still not built.
Good, Margaret. Ceann Comhairle, we got word last night that the Dáil schedule was being ripped up, not to address any of the crises gripping the country or to enact some critical piece of legislation. No, it's to spare the government's blushes and to try to prevent a spotlight being placed on the government's shameful treatment of people with disabilities. Aontú had signalled yesterday that it was going to put down a motion of no confidence in the Tanaiste next week, and within hours, the wagons circled. The government didn't even wait for the text of Aontú's motion to be published because it was so terrified of the prospect of that debate. Instead, they cobbled together this motion and ripped up the Dáil schedule so they can tell the rest of us how well they're doing and how good the government's record is when it comes to the treatment of children, the provision of disability services, and indeed other issues like foreign affairs. It really is incredibly cynical. A political stroke to avoid legitimate criticism of their failure of children with disabilities and their families for years. And this exercise in sheer cynicism will go on for 2.5 hours. Ceann Comhairle, is this government so afraid of debate and so afraid of scrutiny on its own record that it has to sink to this level, preempting a confidence motion that hasn't even been written yet? At a time when this country has such major issues in disability services, in housing, cost of living, healthcare and climate action, it really is incredible that the government is choosing to spend its time in this way. It speaks to a complete lack of confidence in the government benches. It's an acknowledgement that your own record is simply not defensible. It also goes to show where the government's priorities lie, namely with itself. It will drop everything and go to war not to improve services for children with disabilities, but to defend itself and shield itself from criticism. The Irish Times was clear about the reason that we're enduring this farce today. Its news pages, not the opinion pages, said today, and I quote, the government is expected to force through a vote of confidence to diffuse the risk of debate on disabilities during these weeks of campaigning. The government parties are clearly horrified at the thought of a brake being applied to their negative campaigning and a focus being placed on their manner in which it's running the country and its appalling treatment of some of our most vulnerable citizens. And it's no wonder. If you look at the government's record on disability, a failure to even acknowledge the cost of disability in the budget, the highest unemployment rate for disabled people in the EU, and a failure to provide long-awaited justice to thalidomide survivors who were promised a state apology and access to medical cards, not to mention Children's Disability Network teams, personal assistance hours. I could go on and on and on. Ceann Comhairle, recently the current Health Minister was asked in this chamber about the treatment of children waiting for spinal surgery, and she said, "We are making some progress, but I acknowledge that it is too slow and too many children are still waiting." Sounds quite benign and reasonable at first, until important context is provided. For that context, we can start in 2013, when Fine Gael had been in office for 2 years. Back then, 12 years ago, a report into services for children with spina bifida found, quote, major defects and a lack of coordination at a national and local level. That report made recommendations for how services could be improved. Those recommendations were not implemented. In 2017, a damning Children's Ombudsman report was published called "Waiting for Scoliosis, a Children's Rights Issue." It raised, quote, huge concerns about serious and ongoing violations of the rights of children waiting for scoliosis treatment, and concluded there was an onus on all of us to act and for the government to fully and meaningfully address all of the issues raised. In response, the then Minister Simon Harris promised no child with scoliosis would wait longer than 4 months for surgery. That promise was never kept. In 2023, the Children's Ombudsman published the Ivy report into care of a child with scoliosis by CHI. Ivy had been waiting for spinal surgery for scoliosis for 5 years, during which time the curve in her spine went from 30 degrees to over 135 degrees. The report detailed how the uncertainty surrounding Ivy's surgery impacted every aspect of her life, physically and mentally, and caused huge distress for her and her family. That report found numerous failures of governance and communications within CHI. In 2024, a follow-up to the Ivy report revealed that Ivy's surgery was delayed for so long that she was no longer operable. That report also noted that grave concerns have emerged around the safety of some children with scoliosis being treated within CHI. This year alone, there have been 3 further damning reports into CHI. We've learned that non-medical grade springs were inserted into children without their parents' consent or knowledge. An independent audit has revealed that nearly 80% of hip surgeries on children at Kappa and nearly 60% at Temple Street were not clinically indicated. This means that potentially hundreds of children have undergone invasive and traumatic surgeries that they may not have needed. And a separate report into CHI raised huge concerns about a negative and toxic culture which impacted service delivery, staff experience, and had the potential to put patients at risk. It doesn't end there. We're currently waiting for the publication of further reports into CHI, including one on paediatric orthopaedic surgery. So can those on the government benches now understand why families of children who rely on CHI for critical treatment have lost trust in it? And all trust in this government to address the dangerously threadbare disability services that it has responsibility for delivering. We have a mountain of reports that are gathering dust on government shelves, none of which have been acted on in any meaningful way, with the result that generations of children are being failed. There have been repeated promises that waiting lists would be addressed and services would be improved. Those promises have been made for at least 12 years. It never happened, and Fine Gael have been in office throughout all of it. with Fianna Fáil propping it up since 2016 before entering coalition in 2020, yet neither party will take responsibility and are instead spending the whole afternoon in the chamber here praising themselves on the things that they are doing. Ceann Comhairle, Harvey Morrison Sharat was just 1 year old when the Tanaiste made the promise that no child would wait longer than 4 months for surgery. But instead of being cared for and treated quickly, his father Stephen said Harvey was abandoned. He waited years for surgery before finally getting it last November. By then, the curve on his spine had reached 130 degrees, crushing his rib cage and putting pressure on his lungs and heart. Harvey tragically died on the 29th of July. We don't know Harvey's cause of death, but we do know that he needlessly suffered. He endured years of pain and trauma that could have been avoided if he had just been given the health care that he needed. What Harvey endured is not an aberration, it is the norm. Today, as we speak, there are 226 children on the CHI spinal surgery list. 135 of these children are actively waiting for surgeries but don't have a date, up from 108 since the start of the year. Of these, 40 children have been waiting for 6 months or more. Ceann Comhairle, Minister Harris should never have made that promise back in 2017. I think that he accepts that himself. And there have been other health ministers since Simon Harris who have also failed to keep promises on this issue. Last October, just before the election, Stephen Donnelly vowed that the number of children waiting more than 4 months would fall to 20. In part, he said because every child waiting longer than 4 months for treatment would be offered treatment abroad. 12 months on from this commitment, what has happened? Just 8 children have been approved to travel. We now have yet another minister, Jennifer Carroll McNeill, who has vowed to get to grips with this crisis. I welcome her announcement that CHI will be folded back into the HSE by 2027 and that the government will set up an inquiry into the care of children with spina bifida and scoliosis. But that inquiry must be public and parents and advocacy groups must be centrally involved in setting the terms of reference. While I welcome that, we have had report after report that have highlighted failings and issued recommendations. But they have either been ignored or implementation has failed. So the question must be asked, what is the government doing today to ensure that children with spina bifida and scoliosis are treated swiftly and appropriately? And given their abject record of failure, can we really rely on the government to deliver the reform and change that is needed?
Thank you,
the answer to that, quite clearly, is no.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister
and for that
Martin
reason,
Hayden.
I and the Social Democrats do not have confidence in this government.
Minister Martin Hayden.
I rise here today and I want to make 3 quick points in the short time I have available. Firstly, government's commitment and determination to make progress in spinal services for children. The focus of our current and previous Ministers for Health on delivering considerable resources and addressing structural impediments for delivery of improved spinal services. To say to Stephen and Gillian Morrison Sharat that young Harvey's memory, and I say this as a father of young children myself, stays with us all the time as we try and address this issue. And there's no shortage of compassion or empathy, there's no monopoly on compassion or empathy in trying to address what is such a challenging issue for families deeply affected. The second point I want to raise is just to question the timing of the proposed motion that Deputy Tobin flagged he was going to bring next week. The Dáil resumed after the summer break in mid-September, 4 weeks ago today. The motion, as Deputy Tobin had outlined that he would lay next week, would have been 5 weeks since then. Yet the opposition try and suggest there's no alternative motion, there's no alternative motivation behind that. And I wasn't going to make that point today because I thought the public could come to that conclusion themselves.
Deputy, it's not
but instead then, I listened to one of the worst speeches I've heard in this Dáil in my 14 years as a member of this House from Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald. Framing her address in the grief, the distress and the pain of families and young children, she made a statement that the Tanaiste was the only person responsible. I think she said it twice, actually. An incredibly personalised, direct attack that we've come to use from the opposition now, but that will never be acceptable in the discourse. Deputy MacDonald proceeded to blatantly make references to the upcoming national election that will happen in this country at the end of next week. The mask slipped, Deputy. You showed your true colours. You showed your true motivation of the political point scoring you want to deliver here today. The third point I want to make, Ceann Comhairle, is that I stand here to confirm confidence in the Taoiseach, in Simon Harris, and all he has achieved for this country.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. I stand here today to express my full confidence in Fine Gael leader and Taoiseach Simon Harris and his work as a minister in this government. And at the outset, I would like to pass on my sincere condolences to the family of Harvey Morrison Sherratt, and especially to his mum and dad, Gillian and Stephen. We as a government need to do better for vulnerable children, whether they have a disability or they are waiting on vital medical treatment. That includes investing in services and especially early intervention, and ensuring that our health services provide health and disability services to those who need them most. As Taoiseach, Taoiseach and Minister across a number of government departments, Simon Harris has helped build the Ireland of today, which enjoys record levels of employment, a robust and resilient economy, and a commitment to social progress and delivering supports for people who need them most. Without a doubt, Simon Harris's influence and support, without his support, we would not have secured record investment in disability in this budget. Simon's record and dedication to public service is clear for everyone to see, and I'm confident that the result of this vote this evening will reflect the esteem with which he is held across this House. Ceann Comhairle, Aontú's attempt to damage the Taoiseach is nothing but a waste of precious Dáil time. We should be progressing important legislation. Ceann Comhairle, we should be progressing important legislation and progressing improvements in the areas that matter most to individuals and families across the country. A confidence motion doesn't achieve any of that. I'm not sure the public see Aontú as a serious political party. We hear a lot of discourse about people participating in democratic processes, but yesterday outside this House, Deputy Tobin said that he was considering spoiling his vote on Friday week. A serious political leader would never make this statement. A serious political leader would encourage voters to exercise their hard-fought democratic right.
Your time is up.
I have confidence that colleagues across the House will support this motion this evening.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle, and I would like to express my full support in the Taoiseach, the leader of my party, Fine Gael, a person who entered politics to do nothing but good, to deliver and help those that he saw around him, a person who's motivated for all the right reasons to be involved in politics. Unfortunately, on a day like this, you see from the opposition benches far too many politicians who were willing to enter politics to just do posture, to just shout out, to just exploit situations. I think you've been exposed completely for what you really are today. A group of people who will take an issue which they will profess great care for, great understanding of, and to want to represent the people who it affects, but at the drop of a hat are willing to turn that, to use it for their own selfish, as Mary Lou MacDonald showed, political interests, to use it as the leader of Aontú would do. Oh God, he's going to shout everybody down, as always, for your own selfish political interests, and even to have this version of rewriting of facts by the leader of the Social Democrats, who goes into a long speech about why there's a motion of confidence here today, failing to acknowledge that a motion of no confidence, if you wanted it, could have been brought at any time. You didn't. You were cynical. You were absolutely cynical, and you chose to exploit people who have a genuine issue which this House cares about and people on all sides care about, so as you could use it for your own political issues. And that needs to be called out, and that needs to be said. Contrast that with the work that's carried out on a day-to-day basis by the Taoiseach, who's putting our country first, who's representing us proudly, and who's delivering for the people of this country.
Minister of State Robert Troy.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying tribute to Harvey Morrison Sherratt. I know my words today will mean little to his parents, Stephen and Gillian, who have been tireless advocates and campaigners in recent years for what is a serious and unacceptable issue. And as a parent myself, I cannot comprehend what they have been through and what they continue to go through. Too often in this chamber we are consumed by the personalities of the people in this House and the political point scoring, when our focus needs to be on outputs for our citizens. We must never lose sight of what we are trying to achieve as parliamentarians: a better society, a more equal one, not just for today, but for the generations ahead. and no motion of no confidence or counter motion of confidence will help us achieve this. And while Aontú will talk about accountability whenever they get the opportunity, and I share their sentiment in ensuring that we have accountability, but let's be clear, a proposed motion of no confidence in the full knowledge that it would not succeed was not about true accountability. It is about garnering headlines. Last week we saw an increase of 1.6 billion in health, a 20% increase in our disability budget. This is a significant expenditure increase designed to address the challenges we have. And we're in a position to allocate this level of funding thanks to a strong economy and prudent fiscal approach. That work is at risk of being undone if we do not see the level of output and progress across our departments and agencies. The responsibility ultimately lies with us, members of the coalition, to deliver the programme for government. But accountability is not reserved simply for these benches alone. It should be right across our public and civil service. The Taoiseach does not need me to defend him. His electorate have put faith in him time and time again, and we know that this Dáil will vote confidence in him later today.
Ceann-Comhairle, I welcome the announcement by the Minister for Health that there will be an inquiry into spina bifida and complex scoliosis service at Children's Health Ireland, and that it will form part of a wider reflection on paediatric services. The Government is and must confront failures openly and honestly. Peadar Tóibín has said that he will use the presidential election as a referendum on Simon Harris. His actions aren't about families and children. It's not even about Simon Harris. It's all about Peadar Tóibín, someone who demands democratic accountability while trying to convince the country Ireland's democracy is broken because his preferred candidate for the presidency couldn't convince enough independent Oireachtas members to secure a nomination. The fact is Ireland's democracy works because of its citizens and Irish voters. They make our democracy work.
As a new TD, I'm proud to represent the people of Offaly, but little did I think less than 12 months into this Dáil term that we'd be faced with a need for a confidence motion of this nature. It seems that some opposition have more of a problem with democracy than government policy. What really transforms the lives of people in this country are not opposition headlines or political stunts on the eve of elections, but government policies and sustained increased investment in housing, healthcare, education and the future of rural communities. I know personally there is a good chance that I would not be in this chamber today if it was not for the encouragement and commitment to public life that Tanaiste Simon Harris has shown, time and time again proving himself to be dignity, respect and above all hard work. He's dedicated to serving the people of Ireland, and I have full confidence in his leadership and his ability to continue delivering for our citizens.
Deputy Mark Ward.
Ceann-Comhairle, Gillian Sherratt and Stephen Morrison are constituents of mine. They are my neighbours and the parents of Harvey, who we all know died tragically earlier this year. I've got to know Gillian and Stephen very well over the last while, and I have to say I'm really, really fond of them. They're just an ordinary family who are just trying to do their best for their children and build a life for themselves. They carried themselves with such dignity and humanity, first when they tried to get the treatment for Harvey while he was alive, and then secondly in their unselfish pursuit of justice for Harvey since he passed away. This pursuit is unfortunately too late for Harvey. But it's not too late for all the other children who have suffered languishing on waiting lists for life-saving surgery. No child will be left waiting for over 4 months for surgery. That's what you promised in 2017, Tanaiste. Surgery that would save and improve the lives of children with scoliosis and spina bifida. There is a real human impact on this broken promise. Harvey was left suffering on a waiting list to have an operation for 33 months, not in the 4 months like you promised. In those 33 months, Harvey was constantly in and out of hospital as the curvature of his spine increased, putting pressure on his rib cage that twisted around his heart and lungs. I'd just like to take a moment just to imagine what that was like for a young boy to have his lungs being crushed and his heart being pressed in. And imagine the sense of helplessness that Gillian and Stephen felt as parents, watching their beautiful boy deteriorating in front of their very eyes. And while Harvey suffered, CHI, for some inexplicable reason, removed him from the waiting list with no explanation to his family. They still haven't received this explanation. Harvey Sheridan Morrison died on the 27th of July this year. He was only 9 years of age. In his short life, he touched the hearts of a nation. He certainly touched mine. His parents have continued to campaign to get the justice for Harvey so no other child will suffer. Yesterday, and I wasn't on my own, I was at a very emotional presentation here in Leinster House, and I heard of the term medical orphan. The term medical orphan being described for children who are waiting for treatment, for scoliosis treatment. I don't know how we have allowed this to happen in a modern society. Government backbenchers spoke yesterday at the presentation, and he said it was unacceptable that children were suffering, and I have to say I agree with them. And to those backbenchers and independent TDs, you have the chance to do the right thing today. You heard, like I did, the heartbreaking stories from other parents who today, as we speak, their children are suffering exactly the same way that Harvey did because of a broken promise that was made by Simon Harris. Minister, I have no confidence in CHI at all, and neither of you, if you are disbanding it. But the book stops with you, Minister Tanaiste. The book definitely stops with you. You need to be held accountable for the broken promise that you made to Harvey Sherratt, and I have no confidence in Simon Harris.
Deputy Paul Murphy.
Thanks, Cian Corla. We should be clear why we're having this debate now, because I think some on the government benches are confused about it. We're having this debate now because the government has put down the motion. The government chose to put down the motion of confidence this week in what is clearly, blatantly, openly an attempt to avoid scrutiny of its appalling record, particularly in relation to children's health, right before the presidential election next week. That's what's in the papers, that's what we can read. So that's why we're here in that fashion today. It's a political stroke. It's a political stroke that is typical of this government, and the same sort of short-sighted, politically motivated logic presumably is what prompted the Tanaiste to give the solemn promise that he gave when he was Minister for Health, that no child would wait longer than 4 months for a scoliosis operation. It's what should be the case, obviously. I'm sure it seemed like a convenient thing to say at the time to get the heat off him as Minister for Health. But it wasn't true. What happened in reality was that Harvey Morrison Sherratt was forced to wait 33 months for scoliosis surgery, while the curve of his spine went from 75 to 130 degrees. Many more children are still waiting as we speak. The latest figures show there are 40 children waiting for more than 6 months for spinal surgery, while their parents listen appalled to the never-ending stream of scandals emerging from CHI. Would they have had to wait so long if the consultants weren't off performing unnecessary surgeries for profit? Will we ever know the truth? The other reason that we're here discussing this issue is because of Harvey's courageous parents, Gillian and Stephen, who have never given up, never stopped speaking out, and have forced an uncaring government to listen. If they hadn't spoken out, if thousands of people hadn't supported them, thousands of people hadn't come onto the streets in August, we wouldn't be here today. At that protest, Harvey's mother, Gillian, told the crowd that he had to have his whole life put on hold while he waited. We cancelled family holidays, cancelled our wedding, postponed his sister's heart surgery as he sat and waited for a date for surgery. We had to watch him deteriorate, cry in pain, struggle to breathe and lose the sparkle in his eye over those 33 months. Most importantly, though, it robbed him of his childhood. It robbed him of his comfort, it robbed him of his quality of life, and it robbed us of the opportunity to make precious family memories with him. That, to us, is something we will never get over. And people came out to fight for justice for Harvey, to fight against the wait that Harvey had to endure, but also because Harvey symbolises all the children who have to wait. The children have to wait for scoliosis surgery, the children have to wait for appropriate school places, the children have to wait for assessment of needs, the children have to wait for therapies. You may win the vote tonight, and that is likely. But I would say that the people will have a chance to pass their verdict in 9 days' time, and I'm not so sure.
Cian Corla, the motion of confidence. Motion of confidence.
There is no. Sorry, Deputy Healy. Excuse me. Both sides of the House, there will be no mention.
Corla, this motion of confidence is a cynical political manoeuvre. A motion of no confidence has not been lodged, and we've seen no details of such a motion. And the procedure here in this House is unprecedented, and it has more to do with the presidential election due next Friday week. The culture of broken promises, making promises and commitments in the full knowledge that they will not be kept, is undermining trust and confidence in politics and politicians. This will have to stop, or it will undermine the very fabric of society. Politicians will have to be accountable, not just for their actions, but for promises as well. In the 2024 general election campaign, promises and commitments were waived.
We don't. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. I'm confused now. Go ahead. The mention of election at all.
An extra minute,
Go ahead.
Thank you. In the 2024 general election campaign, promises and commitments were made and have been reneged on. The Tanaiste promised that a maximum childcare payment of €200 per month would come into force within 100 days of the new government. Not done, not in the budget, and no mention of it or mention of a public childcare service. The carers means test was to be abolished, again reneged on. There was a commitment to introduce a weekly cost of disability payment, also reneged on. The promise that no child would wait more than 4 months for scoliosis surgery was also reneged on over and over again, and is still being reneged on today as we speak. That broken promise was a profound failure of children with scoliosis, a broken promise which led to pain, suffering and devastation for individuals and families. The culture of broken promises by government and politicians has now expanded into breaking the law. Over 16,000 children with additional needs are on waiting lists for assessments of need, waiting years for assessment despite a legal entitlement to have an assessment within 6 months of referral. Fine Gael have been in government since 2011 and know this very well. And now Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the regional independents are now knowingly breaking the law. And we need to have a situation where that stops urgently. I have no confidence, Count Corley, in the Fine Gael party. Its record in South Tipperary is atrocious. In government, it abolished South Tipperary County Council, abolished Clonmel Corporation, abolished Carrick-on-Shore, Cashel and Tipperary Town Councils, closed Kickham Barracks, Clonmel, and closed St Michael's Acute Psychiatric Unit. I will be opposing this motion.
Deputy Ruth Coppinger.
Cian Corley, let's be clear as to why we're here today listening to these North Korean-style eulogies for Simon Harris. We're here because the government made a decision.
Look, the government no interruptions.
The government made a decision to table a confidence motion in the Tanaiste when there was a rumour of a no confidence motion that hasn't been seen, hasn't been tabled. So I think it's very important that since we have the issues of broken promises and confidence on the table, we deal with all of Deputy Harris's infamous promises. The first one, of course, relates to 2017 and the promise that no child would wait more than 4 months for scoliosis surgery. Tanaiste has a habit of making grandiose promises that he can't fulfil, and we're now in a situation where Gillian and Stephen in particular and the other parents have had to campaign long and hard. And at the briefing yesterday, which has been referred to many times, government TDs left that briefing giving a commitment that they would call for a public statutory inquiry. I want to find out, are we getting this public statutory inquiry? I've heard about an inquiry, but I haven't heard about the actual nature of it. I also want to mention very briefly the spinal surgery waiting list. The key items to come out of yesterday's briefing was that the waiting list is completely static, Tanaiste, that travel abroad hasn't happened, and that the CHI promises and delivers a little bit like yourself. So we need a commitment now for a public statutory inquiry. That's what parents are asking for before we decide how we vote on this motion. I want to also ask you about Palestine. It's another area, Tanaiste, you're responsible for that you've made promises about. There's a horrific genocide for 2 years, as we know. Now, you've talked the talk, but you haven't walked the walk. Are you going to pass the Occupied Territories Bill in full? Because the Taoiseach yesterday indicated that it will just deal with one aspect and not with services. We need to know this before the presidential election next week.
Sorry, Deputy, you're aware of the salient ruling. Don't mention the election.
I'm allowed to mention that there is an election, Tony.
Not in that regard. It's part of the ruling.
We also need to know, Tanaiste, I'd like to ask you, why did you give authorisation for a US military plane to land on Sunday, reportedly that was en route with either troops or armaments to the Nebatim Israeli military base? You've committed to support the Palestinian people, to support the Palestinian state. You were asked to give authorisation to it, and I would like to know why you gave that, because you've made promises to stand for Palestine, and you haven't delivered on that either.
And before I move to the next speaker, I'm going to repeat that I'd ask deputies to have respect for the salient ruling. You're not doing either candidate any favours, anybody. Just let's abide by the ruling. Thank you. I move now to Minister James Brown. Minister James Brown. We don't, it's above, the office of President, as you are aware, is above political debate. Minister James Brown.
Thank you very much, Count Corda.
Minister James Brown.
First of all, I think it is essential that this conversation starts with the people, Harvey and his parents, Stephen and Gillian, and indeed the many more incredible advocates acting with courage on behalf of their children and all of those who have been impacted. I understand that Taoiseach Simon Harris and Minister for Health Jennifer Carr-McNeill met a number of weeks ago with Harvey's parents, and they agreed to work in partnership on the structure of an inquiry into spina bifida and scoliosis services, and to hold a further meeting in a number of weeks. I understand from the Minister for Health that paediatric spinal services are a priority for the Government under the Waiting List Action Plan in 2025 and are overseen by the Waiting List Action Plan Task Force. I am very anxious myself to see movement and progress on this. I would also like to welcome the recent key appointments by the Minister for Health to the Children's Health Ireland Board, including Dr Yvonne Traynor as chairperson, along with Fergus Finlay and Suzanne Garvey. I want to echo the Taoiseach in his opening remarks that this Government is steadfast and determined on engaging robustly on matters faced by the families who have been impacted, but also acknowledge that we have much better and more things to do for those families, for their children, in services and communications. I also echo the Taoiseach's remarks earlier as to the determination of this Government to deliver a transformative programme of work in this area in partnership with the Tanaiste. As someone whose own sister is spina bifida and hydrocephalus, I know that parents and carers know best for their children. I want to put on record today my own engagement with the Tanaiste Simon Harris, particularly in recent months in relation to my role as Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage. And it is my true and fair experience of the Tanaiste that he works exceptionally hard with his government colleagues with focus on implementing the programme for government to make our country a better country for all. The programme for government itself is an ambitious plan and contains significant commitments in housing, and the Taoiseach has been clear from the start of his term that housing and delivery of homes for people across the country is a major priority for him.
Minister Jack Chambers.
Thanks, Cian Corla, and I just want to echo what's been said there. The Taoiseach and everyone in government is deeply committed to working in partnership with families and advocates for children with spina bifida and scoliosis who require that caring support of our health system. As many others have said, I want to express my sincere condolences to the Morrison Sherratt family and to underscore this government's commitment to do more and deliver better services for all children and families. We need to ensure we have a more caring, more compassionate service and system where children who need that support get it in the context of reform of our health system. And the Taoiseach is playing a central role in this, and he has my full confidence in that of the government to transform our approach to our health system. I've been fortunate enough to work closely with the Taoiseach in this government and in the previous one during the Programme for Government negotiations to build a stable coalition government, and in his roles as Taoiseach and Taoiseach. He has defended and protected Ireland's position in all his actions as a small open economy against the threats of tariffs on a scale not seen for decades. He has maintained a really strong focus on Ireland's ongoing role in humanitarianism and in human rights globally. Throughout each of these challenges, the Taoiseach has demonstrated his abilities, his conviction, his leadership and his commitment to building a better and fairer country. Working with him and Minister Carol McNeill as part of Budget 26, we've allocated an additional £1.5 billion for the Department of Health in 2026. Disability funding is over £3.83 billion next year, an increase of 19%. And at a time of heightened global and economic uncertainty, the scale of this investment from government shows that we are prioritising healthcare and disability services for all our people. Now it's important we ensure that this investment delivers the improved treatment and outcomes for children and families.
Thank you,
and
Minister.
the Taoiseach is playing a leading role in this, and he
Thank
has
you,
my full
Minister.
confidence.
Minister Allen Dillon.
I firstly want to express my sincere sympathies to Harvey, Morris and Surratt's parents, Gillian and Stephen, and all families impacted through CHI scoliosis spinal surgery waiting list. This is a deeply serious issue, one we are all united across the Dáil in wanting to resolve. And I know Simon, Government and Minister Jennifer Carroll McNeill are working with parents and advocates to agree a structured partnership to deal with the issues and challenges around scoliosis and spina bifida. This is real action, not political point scoring. Today, I fully support this motion of confidence in my party leader, Simon Harris, a leader who has delivered for Ireland. I see how hard our Taoiseach works. I see the results, real delivery, real progress. Under Simon Harris's leadership, the government has protected jobs, supported businesses and strengthened Ireland's economy. What have Aontú delivered for Ireland and for Mayo? Not one house, not one road, not one job, not one hospital bed, nothing. Paul Lawless, zero. Ken Corla, Aontú's latest attempt to grab headlines is another political stunt. No substance, no solutions, no delivery. Deputy Patherton Bean and his party take our economic success for granted. The fact that we have resources today is because of prudent management by this government, the Taoiseach's leadership and the hard work of the Irish people. In an era of global uncertainty, the government and the Taoiseach are building resilience and opening doors for Irish businesses. In recent months, Minister Burke and the Taoiseach launched the Action Plan on Market Diversification, alongside the Action Plan on Competitiveness and Productivity, a whole-of-government strategy to expand our global trade opportunities and build resilience into Irish SMEs. And what does Aontú offer?
Minister
Nothing.
Kieran O'Donnell.
No constructive
Thank you,
budget,
Minister.
no constructive
Minister
policy.
Kieran O'Donnell.
Thanks very much, Count Corla. And from the outset, I wish to express my deepest sympathies to the parents of Harvey, Morris and Surratt. It must be a very difficult time for the family to lose a young son like that. I know that the Taoiseach Simon Harris and Minister Jennifer Carroll have met with Harvey's parents, and there's going to be further meetings, and they've agreed to work in partnership along with the parents' advocates and the structural requirement to spina bifida and scoliosis services. The most important people here are the parents and their children, and I feel that's pretty front and centre. I think the decision by Minister Carol McNeill to integrate the CHI into the Health Service Executive is welcomed. I think it's needed. But can I just speak about the Taoiseach? He's always acted in good faith, looking to improve the health care services in all roles he's served their government. I know that from personal experience, and I think, we all acknowledge more needs to be done, more needs to be achieved. And we're working in that regard in terms of providing increased level of investment and in terms of reform as well. And I just say, of a general note, in a democracy, governments and public representatives should be held to account. I agree with robust debate and should be debated robustly. However, I fail to see Deputy Tobin's actions here, what benefit that serves in the public good to improve health services in the country. In fact, what the public want is they want collaborative work in all these areas. We've seen it with slaughter care, which was universally welcomed. It was cross-party. We need to work in that regard. Let's have robust debate, but let's not personalise it. It serves no purpose. And can I just say that I very much commend this motion of confidence in the Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Defence, Simon Harris, to the House.
Thank you, Minister.
We're all trying to improve this system.
Deputy
Let's work
Grace
in a
Boland.
collaborative way.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Grace Boland.
Thank you, Count Corla. On Taoiseach Simon Harris has spent his entire career standing up and leading in the face of challenge, showing courage and compassion as he led this country through COVID. Within a month of taking office as Taoiseach, he led Ireland in formally recognising the state of Palestine and apologised to the families and victims of the Stardust tragedy. He has ensured continued humanitarian aid for Gaza, shielded our economy from global shocks and increased overseas aid when others have cut back. That's courage. That's leadership. As a mum and a public representative, my thoughts and sympathies are with the family of Harvey Morrison Sherratt and with all families affected by scoliosis and spina bifida. It's a deeply sensitive issue, one that deserves compassion, care and improved services, not carefully timed political stunts from the opposition. When Deputy Tobin and others major in theatre, staging outrage on the plinth, the Taoiseach and the government are delivering record employment.
Stand here today and say I have great confidence in Taoiseach Simon Harris. Before I was elected, which was only last year, I was a lecturer in TU Dublin, and I saw firsthand the work that he had done to transform that sector when he was the First Minister for Higher Education. I saw him raise the status of apprenticeships. I saw those students then pride increasing themselves when they could walk around campus and feel more equal to all the other students. In particular, I saw the work he did in terms of enabling students with intellectual disabilities access college and third-level places. And again, I saw those students transformed, contribute more to classes, contribute more to their classmates, and make a greater contribution for society overall, and most importantly, be fully valued members of our society. And for those are the reasons that I fully support Simon Taoiseach. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rose Conway-Walsh.
I have listened really intently to every word that has been said here today by all of the speakers. And we are here today specifically because of scoliosis and the promises that were made, where families were threatened, they were ignored, they were told to go away, they were told that they were the problem, they were reported to TUSLA, and it was all under your watch, Tanaiste. Children and young adults were told to go home and to go to their GPs, to go home while their ribs and their bones crush their lungs until they cannot breathe, and that is the fact of why we're here. Mikey Henry, who I have mentioned many times here, is 17 years old with a neurological condition. He's in a wheelchair and he has severe scoliosis. Mikey had a severe scoliosis with a spinal curve of over 100 degrees in 2023. It was made clear to his mum what could happen to his vital organs if scoliosis wasn't treated. Yet Mikey was left to deteriorate. His spine and his lungs were not monitored for another 8 months, Tanaiste. Meanwhile, his lungs were severely compromised. He is now on a BiPAP machine every night to help to remove the carbon dioxide from his lungs. To quote his parents, our hearts were completely shattered when we were then told that he could not have his scoliosis surgery. His spinal curve is now 130 degrees. It was preventable if only Mikey had been looked for. It would not happen in any other country. And that is the thing, Tanaiste. And that is the thing for all of you. It would not happen in any other country. That was made clear yesterday. And I think that is part of why these children couldn't get the help that they needed from abroad either. Because for clinicians in other countries to see these children and what we had allowed to happen to them would not be acceptable. They would see the scale of the problem. You promised Mikey and others they would wait no longer than 4 months for their surgery. Mikey's suffering continues. His parents continue to fight for his life. Why are we not insourcing the expertise from the Great Ormond Street Hospital or for Stanmore? So, Tanaiste, if I hold you and your government responsible for allowing harm to be inflicted on these children and young adults, that is why I cannot express confidence in you or your government today. I just don't trust you. And this is from Mikey's mum. We asked Simon Harris for help last year, but it never happened. He just wished our family all the best. What I want to say cannot be said live on TV. So he has let us down and he has let children down, and that is why, Tanaiste. And to hear everybody uttering confidence today is deplorable.
we've heard a lot of nonsense today from the government in relation to the timing of this debate. This is your motion. We in Aontú promised in August, after the death of Harvey Sharrett, that we would bring a motion of no confidence at the earliest opportunity. Next week is our earliest opportunity to do that. Now, if the death of a child, if the continuous painful suffering of a child, of hundreds of children, if the disablement of hundreds of children is not reason enough for a motion of confidence, what the hell is? In all of the debates that we have all the time in this place, is if the continuous dysfunction of an organisation for well over a decade, leading to all of this harm, and the relationship of that organisation and the minister in charge is not reason enough for a motion of no confidence, what the hell is? Ask yourself that question. Now, I want to bring this back, if I can, to the individual people who are concerned in this. And I want to just mention the case of Ciara Carberry, a 22-year-old girl from Longford. She was diagnosed with early onset scoliosis at the age of 10. And at that time, she had a thoracic curvature of 45 degrees and was put on an urgent waiting list to see a consultant. That didn't happen for 11 months. And in that period of 11 months, the curvature more than doubled. And while she waited, she had suffering. She damaged her thyroid, which affected her mood. Her lungs were crushed and it left her with lung disease. She struggled with stomach problems, which causes her chronic pain every single day. And she's dependent on medication
Deputy
to
Mike
deal with that
Collins.
pain. This is what we're talking about here.
And I'm not giving more. Thank you. Deputy Mike.
Thank you very much, Ceann. I would first like to extend my deepest sympathies to Gillian and Stephen on the heartbreaking loss of their son Harvey. Harvey's story has touched the hearts of people across Ireland. A bright, brave young boy who endured unimaginable pain while waiting for care he so desperately needed. No parent should have to fight for years to secure surgery for their child. No child should be removed from a waiting list without explanation. Harvey deserved better, his family deserved better, and we as public representatives must ensure that no other family suffers the same fate. Yesterday I attended the meeting in the AV room hosted by Senator Tom Clonan. From what I understood, from listening to everyone in there, they are calling for an independent statutory inquiry into CHI's handling of children with complex health needs, which is something I fully agree with. Nowhere did I hear anyone calling for the resignation of someone, and I'm led and said by what the people want. I know the Taoiseach has expressed deep regret and acknowledged the family's pain and has requested a full multidisciplinary report on Harvey's care timeline through the Minister for Health. Personally speaking, I think we should be concentrating on CHI and TUSLA, who have dramatically failed parents to the point of someone dying. And I'm pretty sure I heard the AV room yesterday that their parents are being reported to TUSLA in a way to block them from expressing the way their children are being treated. Some of the failures of CHI: they removed Harvey from the scoliosis surgery waiting list without informing his parents, delaying urgent care. They delayed surgery for 33 months. The inconsistent medical advice left the family confused and unsupported. They failed to coordinate care, leading to the worsening of Harvey's condition. His spine curved 130 degrees, crushing into his lungs and heart. They ignored repeated pleas for help, including requests for meetings with health officials while Harvey was still alive. Disability Services abandoned Harvey in 2019, withdrawing disability supports without explanation. Disability Services failed to provide essential equipment, including a communication device he waited 5 years for. Disability Services neglected specialist care, leaving Harvey without regular access to professionals for his complex needs. These failures contributed to Harvey's suffering and ultimately his death, despite his parents' tireless advocacy. There needs to be urgent reform in Ireland's paediatric healthcare and disability service, and there needs to be a full independent inquiry. I am here in the Dáil since 2016, when an independent TD and on previous motions of confidence or support in Dark Leary, Barry Cowan and Francis Fitzgerald, I didn't agree with no confidence vote. Most of these cases there was reports being drawn up. We are now in the same situation. A full multidisciplinary report on Harvey's healthcare is being drawn up, and independent Ireland, the course of our action will be dependent on that outcome.
Thank you, Deputy Ken O'Flynn.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. And like my colleague here, I think we have to be fair. There's a child's life involved in this. Parents who are not in the gallery, who have not, from what I understand, requested any motion to be brought in this House.
but have requested that we have a multidisciplinary statutory inquiry. And the government, I'm standing in the opposition, and I argue with you on an awful lot of things, but the government has agreed to meet with that family, has engaged with that family over and over again. And I have to say, I think there's political strokes being pulled, not just on the government side today, but there's political strokes being pulled on the left as well. And this battering on one another, it does nothing to help this family. It does nothing to ensure that no other child will suffer what Harvey went through. Only through the statutory inquiry, and only through getting it right, and only through fixing it, and having a commitment left, right and centre in this House, will we achieve something for that family and for the memory of that child. We've dragged that child's name through this House continuously for the last 2.5 hours. For what? So I can get the front page of the Independent, or the front page of the Times, or the front page of whatever local newspaper, and somebody will listen to me and talk to me, and I'll get a clip for 5 seconds on TV3. That's not how we should be doing our business inside here. That is not how we should be doing our business. We should be coming together as a House to ensure that no other child goes through what Harvey goes through. I come here tonight, as the old phrase is, not to praise Caesar, but not to bury him either. And I think it's important that we don't bury one another just for political point scoring, getting one-upmanship on one another when there's a child's life and there's other children's lives at stake on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Paul Gogarty.
In the spirit of my predecessor, I'm also going to play the ball and not the man. This is an issue about scoliosis and spina bifida treatment. It's about what we learned yesterday at the presentation organised by Senator Tom Clonan, the heartbreak that was caused by the systemic failure of successive governments, of Children's Health Ireland, but also before Children's Health Ireland. The way families were treated was absolutely inhumane. It was shocking. I can't even imagine what it was like because I didn't go through it, but those stories would make anyone want to burst into tears. And that's what this motion is about. I see it, some people might call it an opportunistic motion. I call it an opportunity to discuss this issue as quickly as possible. Last night, in the debate on disability, I referenced that presentation. Today, we have the opportunity to talk about it, and I'd like to see, rather than having go at people, can we get a commitment from the government today about that public inquiry? The inquiry, the key asks are that it must compel persons and documents to participate, that children who have passed away must be included, that children, now young adults who have aged out of our services must be included, that we must implement healthcare reform improvements while the inquiry is ongoing, and that we must address clearly the consequences of neglect by CHI, and that there's a state-appointed transition pathway for scoliosis and spina bifida. That's what people asked for yesterday. They want to see progress. The motion here mentions one particular individual, the Tanaiste, who was Minister for Health in 2017, made a promise that couldn't be kept, succeeded by Minister Donnelly and now the current Minister. It's government collective responsibility. And now we have this opportunity. I'd like to see, in the remainder of this debate, a clear statement of intent from the government that it will implement a full statutory inquiry on the basis of the grounds that the parents' representatives of the children requested. I think that's the only fair and meaningful thing we can do. I was inclined to abstain on this motion, and I still am. But equally, I will support the government motion if I get that commitment.
Minister Patrick O'Donovan.
Gurmagut Count Corla agus dus William Machovron Yen of Levwinter Harvey agus Lavelle, William Matakiact Hurt and Tanaiste agus and Rune and the Realtus at Towers Corna Dala and You've. As a friend for a long time since we both sat in this House together since we were first elected in 2011, I wanted to speak today of the confidence that I have in Simon Harris. Since he became a TD for Wicklow and even before that as a councillor and a campaigner for autistic services, Simon has worked day and night to the best of his ability for the people that he serves, particularly people who feel ignored or excluded or treated otherwise differently. As a parent myself, I've seen his dedication and distress over the roadblocks and barriers faced by families trying to access vital services, particularly in the area of disability services. I've heard his frustration as representations he had made himself on behalf of people were answered with clinical words and unacceptably long timelines. I've watched him rise through the political ranks and become a minister, Taoiseach and Tanaiste. And as a politician, he has made his mark quickly. He's always able to set targets and is encouraging people to do the same, looking to the next challenge and pushing people around him to perform to his own work rate, which is exemplary. He leads by example and is one of the most intelligent, strategically motivated and compassionate people I have ever worked with. He's also a human, a husband and a father, and a person of great emotional depth. When he speaks to deliver change and deliver results for people, it is not a lack of personal integrity or responsibility that inhibits that, but rather a structural deficiency in a system that cannot adapt and respond as quickly as Simon Harris does. We are here today because the system failed Harvey, and the Taoiseach, Tanaiste and Minister for Health have already detailed the changes that will be brought about as a result of that, particularly in the area of CHI. Political sniping and performative motions don't change the system. They only slow it down further and distract from the delivery and change that we all desperately need to see happen for all of our children. Children like Harvey deserve better, and the memory of Harvey's life and his legacy deserves better politics, better policies, better public service and better political outcomes. I want to support the motion of confidence into Tanaiste.
At the outset, I would also like to join in the condolences offered to Harvey's family here today. And I do want to say, colleagues, also that I speak here today conscious that much more needs to be done to improve our spinal services for children. I know the parents of children waiting for spinal surgery have real and genuine concerns, and government must address those concerns. Every parent wants the very best for their child and every opportunity for their future, and rightly so. As one of the negotiators for the programme for government, I can say there is a specific commitment to deliver improvements in paediatric orthopaedic services to ensure that children with scoliosis and spina bifida are treated quickly and safely. It is welcome that the number of spinal procedures completed this year up to the end of August is up 13% on last year, and the number of patients on the CHI spinal active waiting list is down 10%. But I do know, however, that these figures are of little or no consolation to the children currently on waiting lists, and that is why we need to do more, and indeed more, to ensure that children who need surgery get it speedily and safely. I know that Tanaiste is personally committed to improving our spinal services for children, and I can assure the House that is a commitment shared right across government. And so we must drive on to deliver the improvements that are needed as quickly as possible. This government has a programme of work to complete. It is a programme of work that seeks to serve this country and its people across a whole myriad of areas, including services for children in need of specialist medical treatment. It behoves all of us in government, and I would suggest all of us elected to this esteemed House to work collectively and cohesively in the best interests of those who elect us and their families. There is a job of work to be done. Let us get on with the job.
Jennifer Moran-O'Connor.
Thank you, Ciarán Comhairle. Yesterday, I attended the AV room and listened to the parents and families of children on the waiting list. My heart goes out to them, and I welcome that the government has committed to an inquiry, and I would urge that this happens as soon as possible. It is right to acknowledge that we are not where we need to be in addressing urgent problems in spinal care, despite the sincere efforts of successive ministers. Strengthening governance and oversight, driving down waiting times and ensuring increased engagement and timely communications with families must be a priority. I know a number of initiatives are underway to help improve access to services, but we must listen to and work with parents and the advocacy groups who are highlighting hugely worrying and important issues. I will be working with the Minister for Health to support her and the government in this work, and I look forward to an inquiry taking place. The family of Harvey and the families of all other children suffering deserve that. We must work to ensure a culture change so that families can have trust in the system. I want to support our Tanaiste Simon Harris here today. I know he is a committed public servant and he feels the pain of this subject deeply. He has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Emer Higgins.
Thank you very much, Ciarán Comhairle. I'd like to start by acknowledging that at the centre of this issue is heartache. For children and families of children with scoliosis on waiting lists, this is personal. It shouldn't be a moment of division or of political point scoring. It needs to be a moment of doubling down on our efforts to deliver for them. The tragic death of Harvey Morrison Sherratt touched the lives of people right across Ireland, and we think of his parents, Gillian and Stephen, and their families, and the parents and families of children who need and deserve better access to improved services. And that is all Simon Harris has ever wanted to do, to improve access to better public services. That's why back in 2009 he stood for election to Wicklow County Council, because to him policies were personal. Since then he's devoted his entire working career, his entire adult life, to improving public services in Ireland. His work ethic, his integrity, his genuine compassion has always been at the heart of how he serves. During our darkest days, Simon led our nation through COVID. He transformed how we deliver apprenticeships, and on behalf of the people of Ireland, he recognised the state of Palestine, creating ripple effects which led to the UK, Canada and Australia following suit. Simon represents us with distinction at home and abroad, and in today's geopolitical climate, diplomacy has never been more important. And in today's negative political climate, it's never been more important that good people with good intentions go into politics. We need more people like Simon. We need more people with his courage, his commitment and his compassion, and I have absolute and full confidence in him.
Thank you, Deputy James Gagan.
Thank you, Cian Corla. Like everybody else who has spoken today, I want to acknowledge Harvey. I want to acknowledge Harvey's parents, Gillian and Stephen, and I say this as a human being, as a parent of 3 children, as a member of Dáil Éireann. And I want to acknowledge Deputy Ken O'Flynn's comments and the spirit with which he made them, which are marked in sharp contrast to the comments of Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald, Deputy Paul Murphy, who I really do think should reflect on what they said. Just to quote Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald, she accused Minister Simon Harris of saying something that sounded good on the radio in the context of him being Minister for Health, a person who has dedicated his life to public service. There's no need to question the sincerity of ministers, question the sincerity of members of this Dáil in the way in which Mary Lou MacDonald did. And all that does is serve to deliver further nastiness in our politics that incentivises the kind of menacing threats and fears that are put out in the online world and in the real world. Simon Harris is someone who has proven when he was Minister for Health that he cared for his people, he cared for his country. As Minister for Higher Education, he fulfilled a lifelong mission to support people with intellectual disabilities and getting them access to third-level education. And as Minister for Foreign Affairs in Europe, he has been a huge leader of speaking up for the war on children that has been taking place in Gaza. I think people should really reflect on the politicisation of this challenging issue that we've heard today. And like Deputy Ken O'Flynn said today, is this really what the parents of such challenging and complex needs really want? Is that really what they want today?
Deputy Micheál Carrigy.
Thank you, Cian Corla. I too was in the AV room yesterday where we were touched by the life experiences which we heard of Ciara and others and Harvey's family, and I think it's only right that we as a government and a nation, we must do better. I fully support the motion of support in Minister Harris. He's honest and open, he's a leader, he's our leader, he's my leader, and he turns aspirations into actions, as he said earlier. I've chaired the Joint Committee on Autism. I challenge him to do more. We challenged him to provide more third-level education. He'd done that. 11 universities now provide courses for kids with intellectual disabilities and autism, and one was launched just in Limerick on Monday. We challenged him for extra places. He provided over 100 places for cross-therapies in colleges, not just here but also in Northern Ireland. We challenged him on assessment of needs. He provided 10 million in 2024, over 1,000 assessment of needs, and only in the last week 20 million in budget 2026 for more assessment of needs. We need more people like Simon Harris in government who are dedicated to public service.
Deputy Padale.
Margaret Cian Corla. Almost a decade ago, the Tanaiste pledged no child would wait more than 4 months for spinal surgery. 8 years later, 9-year-old Harvey Sherratt Morrison died after waiting years for a procedure that could have saved his life. The curve in his spine went from 75 degrees to 130 degrees, and by that time that he received surgery, The curve had reached a point where it could not be fully corrected, causing his ribcage to twist around his lungs and heart, restricting his breathing, and he lost his life. A life for which he and his parents had battled so long and hard. So his story demands accountability and it demands justice. His story of years of immense suffering and pain, being ignored and sidelined, is not an isolated one. It's all too common for many children and their families in Ireland suffering with scoliosis and spina bifida. And Daniel Collins from Tralee is another child forced to wait years for urgent treatment. He was born with a number of disabilities which require extensive 24/7 care. In 2023, he was diagnosed with scoliosis and it was flagged as urgent care, but he didn't receive surgery until June of this year. One of the most distressing elements of his case is how familiar it sounds. He was waiting so long that his curve went from 22 degrees to 79 to over 90. Liam Dennehy from Killarney also faced the same wait. He was left to wait so long that even after surgery, he would be left with a 35-degree curve for life. His tendons have shortened, he continues to suffer from adult acid reflux, and his hands will be locked inward for life. Speaking to his mother, Pam Dennehy, Pam said, "It was like being forced to watch your child die right before your eyes in a country that's supposed to have a health system that works. But all around her, all she can see is failure. From no disability services to this government's treatment of carers, to in Kerry, which lacks early intervention classes, we only have 2 for the whole county. A town like Mallow has 3. Cork has 22. Those who need support and treatment the most are being totally overlooked and continuously failed." She said that she was sickened by the fact that those in government who should be held accountable refuse to take responsibility. She says that they are allergic to accountability, and as a result, things get worse because nothing ever changes. Pam asked me to ask everybody here, how would they feel if your only hope your child had of receiving life-saving treatment was to force the government's hand by posting pictures online? She still says that she finds it hard to live with the fact that she was forced to do this. I hope you would agree that she had no choice. After all, the first time that she was ever contacted after years of reaching out was the night before her first failed surgery, which finally took place not longer than the maximum 4 months it had been promised that it would take. Finally, Pam asked me to say that there was no more room for cynicism for the 8th, 9th or even 10th chance. There was a similar vote of no confidence in 2019. That should have been the end of it. Gillian Sherritt said it best, as you failed upwards, and it's about justice, accountability and the truth. And I hope that all Kerry TDs will support or oppose the motion.
Ceann Comhairle, I support the government's motion of confidence in Tanaiste Simon Harris. I know the Tanaiste to be hardworking, to be diligent, to be caring and solution-driven. As Minister for Foreign Affairs, he is showing leadership in response to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the war in Ukraine. That is the type of leadership I support, not the political theatre that we've seen this week from Aontú in particular. Before I go further, I want to address the tragic death of Harvey Morrison Sharrett. Harvey's passing has been heartbreaking and devastating for his family. It has raised the public's concerns for failures in the system and exposed unacceptable delays in paediatric spinal care that must be urgently addressed. Delays and neglect causes pain, suffering, anguish, and leaves a lasting mark on the lives of these children and their parents. We know the Tanaiste and Minister of Health, Minister McNeill, met with Harvey's parents, Gillian and Stephen, and other advocates. They agreed to work in partnership on the structure of an inquiry into scoliosis and spina bifida services. This is an important step and demonstrates a genuine commitment to ensuring issues are identified and acted upon. Alongside this, significant additional investment has been allocated to strengthen paediatric spinal services, including a ring-fenced theatre and additional outpatient clinics. National and international outsourcing is being activated to maximise capacity and reduce waiting times for patients. A paediatric spinal services management unit led by a consultant orthopaedic surgeon and supported by a multidisciplinary team has also been established to ensure patients are prioritised appropriately and that waiting times are reduced.
Deputy Tobin has choreographed a moment in the spotlight to grab more time in front of the cameras. As a long-serving member of this Parliament, I consider it to be cynical and opportunistic. It is one thing to highlight a problem. It is another thing to use it as a megaphone without a plan, which risks turning genuine suffering into political theatrics. We should not be diverted from the vital task of improving paediatric spinal care by deliberate, orchestrated political manoeuvring. This is a grandstanding proposal that does nothing to improve our health service or the workings of government. In my view, Deputy Tobin's actions weaken the seriousness of the debate around this very substantial and complex issues involved. Our constituents who elect us implore us to work to the best of our ability, to collaborate, to implement reforms, and to deliver well-resourced services with accountability, with efficiency and productivity. Ireland needs accountability, especially when it comes to protecting our children. But political gain should never come at the cost of dignity, particularly when children are involved. The line between advocacy and opportunism is thin. Sinn Féin and Aontú's strategy is more about visibility than impact. Advocacy should be rooted in empathy and constructive action, not outrage alone. Constant criticism without offering constructive and practical alternatives can make things worse, not better. Thank you.
And now Minister Mary Butler, chaired by Deputy or Minister Helen
McAnally. I stand here this afternoon to acknowledge Harvey Morrison Shearett and the absolute tragedy of his death. Harvey's short life was marked by courage and resilience in the face of spina bifida and scoliosis, and I acknowledge that he suffered delays in accessing the care he so desperately needed. To his parents, Gillian and Stephen, your advocacy and strength throughout all this time has brought the attention of the nation to the failings in our children's health services. Your grief must be heard. But I also want to say, as somebody who's in the Department of Health for the last 6 years, that has worked with many clinicians, nurses, doctors, carers, health and social care workers, no person in healthcare goes to work to do harm. They go to work to help and to heal. The Tanaiste and the Minister for Health met with Harvey's parents. They listened to the concerns and committed to taking action, an inquiry into scoliosis and spina bifida care. Minister Carl McNeill has announced her intention to fully integrate Children's Health Ireland into the HSE, which I 100% endorse, a necessary step to ensure we strive to deliver the best healthcare for our children. We must act, we must reform. That is the least that Harvey deserves, and I know the Tanaiste has shown us the courage to lead, even in difficult times. I believe the Tanaiste acted in good faith. Simon Harris is determined to ensure this government delivers the changes and reform that is necessary. He is a politician of action, and I know he is working hard to ensure all members of government deliver for children and deliver for Harvey's memory. I utterly condemn the abuse, the threats, the social media rhetoric, the vile language the Tanaiste and his family have been subjected to. It has crossed a line. I stand here today to express my confidence in the Tanaiste. Why? Because of my lived experience of working with the Tanaiste for the last 10 years. We soldiered together for many, many years on the Cath Lab for Waterford, which is now state-of-the-art, up and running, and we're at the final stage where the last staff for 24/7 are being recruited. Work closely with the Tanaiste in delivering a technological university for the South East, hugely important for an area that did not have a university. And I will remember a really low day I had myself when I was dealing back in 2022 with the Maskey report in relation to Kerry Cams and the harm that was caused to 240 children, 42 of them significantly harmed. And I was walking down the corridor after speaking in the Dáil, and I met the Tanaiste on the bridge, and the Tanaiste stopped me and he said, "Whatever we can do to help, whatever funding is required, you will have it." So thank you for that, Tanaiste, because I have never forgotten it. I also want to say that talk is cheap when you're speaking in this chamber. And I listened to Deputy Conor Sheehan earlier, where the government was called clapped out and a hollow husk, a word that we've heard used a lot about the government. I never come to work clapped out. None of my colleagues ever come to work clapped out. I'm not hollow. I'm in politics for the right reason, to try and do the best I can. The Taoiseach is in hot politics for the right reason. Every one of my colleagues that I sit with every day of the week come to work to do the best they can. And I just think, you know, it's so easy, because what really strikes me, I had only left the chamber after being called clapped out when a deputy stopped me to know could I do something for him. So if I'm clapped out, I don't know how I'm going to be able to deliver. So, it's just really, really strange. We have to get on with the work. We have completed just one budget in 5, and I'm encouraged by the opportunity ahead for this government to deliver.
Thank you. And now Deputy Minister Helen Mack.
Thank you, Ken Corley. Can I begin by saying that I have absolute confidence in the Tanaiste Simon Harris. And I say this not just as a colleague, but someone who first met Simon 20 years ago, long before either of us were elected to politics. I know the kind of person he is. He's someone of compassion. He's someone with a relentless drive to deliver for people right across this country. He's someone who works tirelessly, who listens carefully, and who leads with that compassion. He's a person who acts, who doesn't shy away from difficult issues, and we know there are many challenges in politics, but also he's someone who has never forgotten why he got into public life, to make his and indeed our communities better. This motion of no confidence is not about solutions, it's not about making things better, it's not about compassion or accountability, it is a political stunt. Deputy Tobin announced it more than a week before it could even be debated, not because he wanted to give families certainty, but because he wanted to create a spectacle. And before the House, and for Deputy's own record, if he checks his own Facebook comments, he himself has said that this upcoming election should be a referendum on Simon Harris. So your objective is very, very clear here. Rather than be distracted by attempts at point scoring, this government is determined to get on with the real work, delivering an inquiry into scoliosis and spina bifida care that will finally give families, and most importantly children, the answers and improvements that they so rightly deserve. And I do want to take this opportunity, along with so many others in this House, to offer my sincerest condolences to Gillian and Stephen, the parents of Harvey Morrison Sherratt. My sincerest condolences on their unimaginable loss. I don't think any of us can really truly imagine what they are going through. But what I can say, and I think it's been said by so many colleagues, is that we are absolutely committed to do better. We must do better for Harvey, for his parents, and for so many other children. We've heard that the Taoiseach Minister for Health have met Harvey's parents, Gillian and Stephen, and other parent advocates on September 29th, and together they have agreed to work in partnership on the structure of that inquiry. And I know, and I've spoken to Minister Carl McNeill and the Taoiseach and others, that they will continue to engage closely with Harvey's parents and indeed with many others on further meetings. There's no one in this chamber, Ken Carla, who has a monopoly on compassion. And it's important to say that, because every one of us, and we've heard it, I think, very eloquently from my colleague, every one of us cares deeply about the work that we do. We've been elected by those who have voted for us and those who haven't in our constituency. And our job is to come in here and to make the lives of those around us better, to improve our communities. And the politics that I see coming out of this particular motion, let's be clear, this is about dividing this chamber. It's about dividing communities, and what's even worse is that this type of politics, it's about dehumanising and personalising these types of issues and political point scoring on something that is so difficult for so many families. It's much harder, or much easier, to create a division, but it's much harder to actually form a consensus and to make things better. And again, that's what we are focused on doing here. The number of children waiting more than a year on spinal surgery, it's dropped. There are more theatre sessions, there are more surgeons, there are more procedures happening than ever before. It's not enough, but it is progress, it is delivery, and we will do much more. In relation to my colleague Simon Harris, he has shown significant leadership. As Taoiseach and now as Taoiseach, we've seen real leadership and delivery, not just at home but abroad. He recognised the state of Palestine within a month of taking office as Taoiseach, showing absolute leadership at home but abroad as well. He apologised to the Stardust families after 42 very long and difficult and painful years of waiting. He continues to defend Ireland's interests globally as Minister for Foreign Affairs, Trade and Defence. As Minister for Health, he established the All-Party Sláinte Care Committee. He led the implementation of this report. He expanded access to medical and GP visit cards for children with disabilities. He introduced state-funded IVF as Minister for Further and Higher Education. He He reformed our apprenticeship systems. He worked to establish new technological universities across our country. And as Minister for Justice, he introduced legislation to increase penalties for assaults against emergency workers, again ensuring stronger protections for those who serve our public. And more broadly, this government and those who think this government is done. We've only started. This was the first budget of 5. We cannot remind people enough of that. This was the first of 5. But we are focused on making sure that we provide real opportunities for families in every part of this country. And we started by making sure we increase carers' supports, by increasing supports for people with disabilities, by building more homes than at any point in the past decade, by ensuring we have regional balanced development. And all of this has been done with the support of our Tanaiste, somebody that I and all of us are very proud to work with. Politics is about making a difference. It's about showing up, it's about working together, it's about improving lives, not scoring points, which is what Deputy Tobin is trying to do here. The motion of no confidence was designed to divide, distract and drag the Dáil into theatre at a time when families are looking for solutions. By contrast, Simon Harris's leadership at home and abroad has built consensus and delivered results, and I am proud to say that I have every confidence in our Tanaiste, in this government and in the values that guide us: compassion, delivery and integrity in public life. Thank you, Ken Corley.
Minister. Anish. Is í an cheisná go néantar an tairsingt, na teachtaí atá ar taobh na cheist Aberdis tá. Na teachtaí atá an gcuine Aberdis níl. I believe the motion is carried. Vote all. There will be long bells, deputies.
And Emer Curry, Deputies Neil Padder Tobin and Paul Lawless. result, Deputies Thaw 94, Deputies Neal 65 and 1 Stawn. Deputies, we have a thorough result. The motion's carried. We now go to sus for 1 hour.